how can you bridge the gap between the parents' lack of knowledge about golems and the fact that you don't have to know about golems? Like, how do you make parents comfortable with not already being familiar?
Well, that's what I'm hoping you can help me with.
Okay, well, let's think about this. This is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz. American Golem by Marc Lumer is a very funny picture book about a mud monster making a new life for itself in New York City. Vicki Weber of Apples and Honey Press told me all about it at the Association of Jewish Libraries conference in Boston in June 2018. And I was very flattered that she also asked for my advice about marketing the book. If you have any ideas for Vicki, give us a call or leave a comment at bookoflifepodcast.com. I'm here at the Association of Jewish Libraries conference in 2018 in Boston, Mass. And I'm sitting with Vicki Weber from Apples and Honey Press. And she just showed me a brand new book. Is this out yet?
No, it'll be out in October.
Okay. And this book is called American Golem, The New World Adventures of an Old World Mud Monster by Marc Lumer. So tell us about this book.
Well, essentially, it takes the story of the immigrant experience, how a young boy brings with him to America the ideas from his old country, including the idea that he needs protection in order to get through his life. He's a young Jewish boy. He's come from Eastern Europe. Here he is in America. And so he feels he needs protection in his daily life. And in order to do that, he creates this mud monster, a golem, from his experience in his former life, and discovers maybe that he doesn't need it in the same way. And so it's an interesting transition for him to start a new life in a new place where life is different. And what is also interesting is that the poor golem, when he is no longer needed by the little boy, he needs something else to do too, because now he inhabits the world. And what is a mud monster to do?
So that's sort of the conceit of the book, is then he goes and tries to get different jobs around New York City, and you see him engaging in all sorts of pursuits.
And he fails at them because he's really not quite cut out for a lot of this stuff until at the end, I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but he finds something that he's really cut out to do, and it's adorable.
Tell us a little bit about the process of this book coming into existence.
Marc Lumer is just a very creative animator. His past experiences included working on films like The Prince of Egypt. He did a book a couple of years ago for Apples and Honey Press called Babel, which is about the Tower of Babel. He has a very specific look and feel to his art, and his work is really driven by his art and the way that that serves the story. And he has a very specific vision of this little boy and of this monster and of the feeling of the Lower East Side at this time of immigration in the U.S.
I noticed that a few spreads had a sort of Knuffle Bunny style of cartoon on top of archival photos.
Yeah, that was a really interesting technique that I think helps bring alive that feeling of being in the space and gives it a veracity and locates it very specifically. We have a similar book that came out from Apples and Honey Press a year or so ago called Journey Through Jerusalem that takes kittens through the various sites in Jerusalem in the same way, so that the kittens are animated and the scenes from Jerusalem are actual photos.
So if a reader is not familiar with the traditional story of the Golem, is there going to be any confusion, or will they miss some layer without that knowledge when they come to this book?
Well, at the end of all of our Apples and Honey books, we do have a page for the parent and reader that helps place things into context. And so there is that possibility for a little extra learning. We try not to freight our stories with too much didactic content in order to let kids explore them as they come to it. And I think that that's a really interesting way for children to experience this book. Come to it and experience it just as a story on its own. And yet, at the end, for the parents who may want to help explain to their children about this tradition, there is some context located for them there.
Okay. Now, when you pulled out this book to show me, you said that you were struggling a little bit with marketing it. What did you mean about that?
I think that there are parents who may not know about the Golem as a tradition in Jewish literature. People who come from a strong cultural experience or from certain areas of the country may recognize it, but there may be a lot of parents out there who don't immediately recognize that. So how do we talk about this story?
With the Golem right there smack in the middle of the cover, and the words American Golem with the American in red block lettering and the Golem in blue Hebraic style English lettering, it's right up there that this is a Golem story, and if you don't know what that is, maybe children will see the monster and just open the book because there's a monster on the cover. But you think that parents might hesitate because it's unfamiliar?
That's what we wonder. I think that the cover itself is really attractive, and I think that you see very immediately that it's an American story with some kind of Jewish old world content to it. And then you have the time of the story, so you can see Eastern European immigrants coming off a very large ocean liner, and you see this little newsboy guy in a cap, and then this mud monster. So I think that it is very attractive to a young child, but it's usually the parents who buy the book.
So how can you bridge the gap between the parents' perhaps lack of knowledge about golems and the fact that you don't have to know about golems? Like, how do you make parents comfortable with not already being familiar?
Well, that's what I'm hoping you can help me with.
Okay, well, let's think about this.
Subtitle helps. A New World Adventures and an Old World Mud Monster. I do like the quote on the back, which is, "Change your place, change your luck," from the Talmud, because that's really what happens to this young man.
I think that once you open the book and you see that it's a friendly sort of story with actually a lot of iconic imagery, like the Golem climbing up a building in a King Kong kind of a way, you know, the things that the parents will recognize and get a laugh out of, I think that they would enjoy it. So the question is just how to let them know that this is going to be something that they will be fine with if they just take a chance. Well, Apples and Honey books generally are marketed to a Jewish audience.
Yes.
And they are more likely to be familiar with the Golem than maybe a general audience would be. So I guess the question is then, what are you worried about?
Well, I hope nothing. We adore this book. It's really unusual and fun, and yet evokes something of our collective immigrant past. And so we're hoping that families all over discover this book and see the immigrant experience just a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. And of course, immigration is a very hot topic these days. How do you hope readers will end up seeing immigration after they read this book?
Well, I think that the quote on the back says a lot. People came here to change their lives, and this little boy certainly experiences that feeling of being in a place that's a more optimistic, a little safer, a little friendlier. Mm-hmm. And while we know that that's not always everyone's experience all the time, I think that's the aspiration.
Okay. I feel like there's probably more layers in here that we're not happening to think of right now because we're in the buzz of a conference. But just because, you know, the Golem is such a rich symbol and immigration is such a controversial topic at the moment, it seems like there's probably more going on that maybe even the author didn't think of. But I don't know what it is to pick it out right now.
Moment, but I think that that's, we like to think that we're putting out stories that are multi-layered and that people can find a lot in and bring a lot to from their own experiences.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking with the Golem being such a visually arresting character, sort of scary and friendly at the same time, maybe you can use him as sort of a spokesgolem, around the book, that he can sort of become an independently speaking character on promotional materials or on a website or somebody in a costume or with a puppet, like in a video.
That's a really interesting idea.
Or as a cardboard cutout with a balloon coming out of his mouth, a speech bubble. Or, just like have him say who he is, or maybe the story with his quest to find something to do, like ask for suggestions,
Oh, that's a really
invite
interesting idea.
people to suggest jobs a golem could do. That could give him an opportunity to describe his qualifications.
That's true.
I'm strong, I never quit,
I'm deeply loyal.
I'm loyal,
yes.
right, and so what job would you give me?
I think that sounds like a great idea. We'll get to work on that right away. Do you want to walk around in a golem costume?
I probably would do that. So, all right, well, great. Thank you for speaking with me.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Hi, this is Barbara Bates. I am the author of The Sundown Kid, A Southwestern Shabbat. Excited to be on the Book of Life podcast, and I'd like to dedicate this podcast to my friends at the Yiddish Book Center. Thanks so much.
If you enjoy the Book of Life podcast, please become a patron at patreon.com/bookoflife. Leave a review on iTunes or a comment on our blog at bookoflifepodcast.com. You can also like our page at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast. Follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening and happy reading.